And you're watching Vantage with me, Palki Sharma. Merry Christmas to all of you. If you've had a good day with your friends and family, thank your stars and count your blessings, because for many, Christmas has been cancelled. Wars and conflicts do not pause for festivals. In Gaza, they got worse. Almost 80 people were killed in Israeli strikes on Christmas Day. Bethlehem, the birthplace of Jesus Christ, is in mourning. In the Red Sea and now the Arabian Sea, drone strikes continue. 2 Indian ships came under attack. The US blames Iran for this. We'll tell you what Iran has said. Meanwhile, another conflict is brewing in West Asia. Turkey is attacking Kurds in northern Iraq and Syria. It claims to have killed more than 50 of them in multiple strikes. In Russia, Putin is winning next year's election. We already know this, but he may also be the only one contesting. His challengers are being disqualified. What's happening in Indian wrestling? Why is Serbia witnessing violent protests? Why has hiring in tech come to a grinding halt? Why are there no takers for the Indian rupee? And why gifting can be tough. We'll talk about all this and more. The headlines first. The battle over Crimea and Christmas. Kiev says it has shot down 28 out of 31 Russian drones launched from Crimea. It comes as Ukraine celebrates Christmas on the 25th December for the first time. It's a snub to Moscow because Ukraine and Russia follow the Julian calendar, where Christmas is celebrated on the 7th of January. Philippine troops killed 9 communist rebels. The Communist Party had declared a 2-day unilateral Christmas truce. Last month, the Ferdinand Marcos government and the rebels had agreed to resume peace talks. Will a joke cost the British Home Secretary his job? James Cleverly is under fire after joking about spiking his wife's drink with a date rape drug. Despite his apology, Cleverly is facing calls to resign. Beijing records its longest cold wave in 7 decades. Since the 11th of December, the Chinese capital has had over 300 hours of below freezing temperatures. Parts of northern China have also hit minus 40 degrees Celsius. And British billionaire Jim Ratcliffe buys 25% stake in Manchester United. After months of negotiations, the deal was sealed for around $1.3 billion. Manchester United is the world's second most valuable soccer club after Real Madrid. Currently, they're facing the worst slump in their history. We start with the Red Sea crisis. It is escalating and putting vital Indian trade routes at risk. In 2 days, 2 Indian ships have been attacked. These are commercial vessels. They were targeted by drones. And who was behind these attacks? The US says it was Iran. Tehran has denied the charge. Meanwhile, traders are anxious. Maritime trade worth $200 billion is at stake. Let me tell you what happened over the weekend. The first attack took place on Saturday on a ship called MV Chem Pluto. This vessel transports chemicals. It is owned by a Japanese, operated by a Dutch entity, and apparently linked to Israel. Reports say this ship is connected to a man called Aiden Ofer. He is a shipping tycoon from Israel. It's not clear how he is linked to the ship. On Saturday, the ship left Saudi Arabia. It was on its way to India. 22 crew members were on board. 21 of them were Indian. 1 of them was from Vietnam. The ship was here in the Arabian Sea, just 370 kilometers off the Indian coast. At around 10 o'clock local time, the ship was struck by a drone. It caught fire. Thankfully, no casualties. Now, assets from the Indian Navy are in the region. They're providing assistance, facilitating safe movement of cargo. So when Chem Pluto was hit, the Indian Navy diverted an aircraft. It flew over the ship and contacted the crew rather. Later, a warship also made its way to the site, the INS Mormugao. This is a new ship, a guided missile destroyer. The drone strike did not lead to significant damage, so the Chem Pluto resumed its journey to Mumbai, this time under escort of an Indian Coast Guard vessel called Vikram. Vikram is accompanying the Chem Pluto to Mumbai. The US too was monitoring these developments. And on Saturday, the Pentagon blamed Iran for the attack. It's a very serious allegation. The US statement says the drone was launched from Iran. It was a one-way attack drone. designed to explode when it hits the target. And what is the basis of this claim? If the US has any intel, it has not shared it. Earlier today, Tehran spoke out. It said, American claims are false. So New Delhi will have to navigate this cautiously because India and Iran have an old partnership, while the US and Iran are old and bitter rivals. And tensions between the two are growing. The latest bone of contention is the Houthi rebels in Yemen. They're targeting commercial ships. Since November, the Houthis have attacked more than 10 ships all over the war in Gaza. The Houthis say they're punishing Israel for it. And Iran supports the Houthis, also gives them drones and missiles.
This past weekend saw 4 attacks against 3 separate commercial vessels operating in international waters in the southern Red Sea. We have every reason to believe that these attacks, while they were launched by the Houthis in Yemen, were fully enabled by Iran.
So far, the attacks were confined to the Red Sea, but Saturday's incident indicates an escalation. It happened in the Arabian Sea, miles away from the Red Sea. And if the American claims are true, Iran was directly involved. But like I said before, Tehran has rejected that claim. It has also responded to the US. Listen to this.
Yemen has officially declared its position. Its official spokesman of its Yemeni government repeats their actions daily. Yemen's move in the Red Sea is really and completely a Yemeni move in support of Gaza. And this American accusation about involvement in the recent Navy attack is a baseless accusation against the Islamic Republic.
On Sunday, there was another attack on another Indian ship, the MV Sai Baba. It had 25 crew members, all of them Indians. The Sai Baba was operating in the Red Sea. This vessel too was headed towards India. It was struck by a drone. The ship issued distress calls. A US warship responded, the USS Laboon. Again, no casualties were reported, but the repercussions are wide-ranging. There could be casualties beyond human life. The Indian economy itself could be impacted. And we've talked about this before. The Red Sea is an important trade route, the shortest link between Asia and Europe, with ships passing through the Suez Canal. Every year, goods worth more than $1 trillion, more than $1 trillion, pass through the Suez. This route is vital for the Indian economy. 20% of India's exports pass through it. I have some estimates for this year. In 2023, crude worth $105 billion, merchandise exports worth $106 billion, and imports worth $98 billion passed through the Suez. This is the kind of money at stake. And shipment costs are already mounting. You see, ships need insurance. They don't move without insurance. And with these attacks, the cost of insurance has shot up by anywhere between 10 to 15 lakh rupees at this point, or $12,000 to $18,000. Also, many ships are avoiding the Red Sea to take longer routes. So time and fuel cost have both increased. According to some estimates, shipping times have gone up by 2 weeks. Freight costs are up by 30 to 40%. And who will bear this additional cost? Us, the consumers. The exporters will pass on the burden to buyers, and prices of some products will increase, like crude, palm oil, cereal, machinery, electrical goods, auto components, apparel and textiles. So if these attacks continue, you will feel the pinch. Although there is some good news today. Maersk is a major shipping company. It will go back to the Red Sea route. It is relying on the US Coalition for Safety, the coalition of 20 countries called Operation Prosperity Guardian. That's what they're calling it. They announced it last week. These countries will patrol the Red Sea to secure the shipping lanes. The Houthis have a warning for them.
We will not stand idly by if the Americans are tempted to escalate further and commit foolishness by targeting our country or waging war against it. We will respond to any American targeting, and we will make American battleships, interests and navigation a target for our missiles, drones and military operations.
So the Houthis say they will now target American ships. And this can only mean one thing. This crisis is getting bigger. The Red Sea attacks are a byproduct, the result of the war in Gaza, one that keeps escalating. Yesterday night was among the deadliest yet. Israel targeted a refugee camp in Gaza. This is Maghazi in central Gaza. It is located around 20 kilometers from Gaza City. The strikes began hours before midnight. They continued well into Christmas Day. Last we checked, around 80 people were killed, 80, including 12 women and 7 children. You can imagine the horror. It's cold and dark. Most families have put their children to sleep, but suddenly missiles drop around you. Take a look at the aftermath.
It is all targeting civilians. We are all targets. There is no safe place. We were displaced from Gaza. They told us to get out and go to a safe place in the central. We came to the central, and in the central, we were martyred.
It's heartbreaking. Most Gaza hospitals can barely keep the lights on. So imagine getting dozens of patients in the middle of the night. It's a hopeless situation. And this morning, the extent of the damage became clear. Just look at these pictures. Dozens of bodies lying outside the hospital, all of them wrapped in white body bags. These people had nothing to do with the war or with Hamas. They were refugees in a temporary shelter. So why did Israel attack them? Well, their military says this incident is being reviewed, that Israel is committed to protecting civilians. I'm afraid it's a weak defense now, because Benghazi was not the only target. Israel also hit Rafah and Khan Yunis. Again, so-called safe zones. So I guess the message is simple and clear. All of Gaza is now fair game. The only question is, for how long? This weekend, US President Joe Biden spoke to Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. We know Washington is unhappy with Israel's strategy, but did Biden push for a change? He says he did not ask for a ceasefire. Meanwhile, Netanyahu says he doesn't take orders from the US.
A private conversation. I did not ask for ceasefire.
ראיתי פרסומים שגויים.
I have seen false publications claiming that the US prevented and is preventing us from operations in the region. This is not true. Israel is a sovereign state. Our decisions in the war are based on operational considerations, and I will not elaborate on that. They are not dictated by external pressures.
So to get you up to speed, Biden doesn't want a ceasefire. The UN Security Council won't call for a ceasefire, plus the truce talks in Egypt are stalled. So what's the way out? When and how will this war end? Maybe when Israel has had enough. The fighting is putting pressure on their economy, so the Treasury has some recommendations. Number one, shut down 10 government ministries, like the Settlements Ministry, the Jewish Tradition Ministry, the Intelligence Ministry, and the Regional Cooperation Ministry. If you shut them down, you can save money. That's what they've recommended in Israel. Number two, cutting off coalition funds, basically the money set aside for fulfilling political promises. This is expected to generate $1.4 billion. And number three, increasing value-added tax. It's currently at 17%, and it applies to all consumer goods. So if the value-added tax or VAT rises, all Israelis will pay. I know these suggestions sound drastic, but Israel needs a lot of money, around $20 billion to cover the wartime budget. So there is financial pressure on Israel. And that's not the only kind. In Gaza, the fighting is high intensity, meaning Israel is also losing soldiers. 10 of them were killed on Sunday, 5 were killed on Saturday. Netanyahu says it's the price of war.
The war has a price, a very heavy price, in the lives of our heroic warriors, and we are doing everything to safeguard the lives of our warriors. But one thing we will not do, we will not stop until we achieve victory.
So three kinds of pressure: financial, political, and military. What is Israel's plan to tackle it? Well, every day they're uncovering more Hamas tunnels. They're chasing Hamas leader Yahya Sinwar. Look at the latest discovery.
זה מקלחת ושירותים. מקלחת שירותים, דלת, קומפרסור חדש, כלי עבודה, שוב פעם, מיכה עם מים קרים, מים, בלון לחץ סביר, מאוד גדול, תחמושת וייצור 762.
The assumption is these tunnels will expose the Hamas. It will turn the public opinion. And yes, the tunnels are quite something. Hamas has very cleverly been diverting aid money to build these tunnels. But has that changed the position of governments around the world, or indeed people? I'm afraid not. Even Israelis are not happy with Netanyahu. They held a protest in Tel Aviv this weekend. They want him to step down. So clearly, there has to be a rethink. If not a ceasefire, then at least a reduction in the intensity. Because today is day 80 of this war. There is no excuse for carpet bombing or striking a refugee camp. If Netanyahu keeps doing this, he will only alienate more people. Let's turn to India now, specifically to the Indian rupee. The government has been trying to internationalize the rupee, basically getting more countries to use it. But turns out that's easier said than done. Take oil trade, for example. A big chunk of the oil trade is carried out by India's state-owned companies. None of them use the rupee. That's right. No crude oil import was settled in the Indian currency. This is from April 2022 to March 2023. The question is why? Well, the Petroleum Ministry has some answers. Listen to this, and I'm quoting. Suppliers continue to express their concern on the repatriation of funds in the preferred currency and also highlighted high transactional costs associated with conversion of funds. So two issues. One, difficulty in taking the money back home, which is repatriation, and two, conversion costs. The cost of converting foreign currency to the rupee and vice versa. Does that mean the rupee experiment has failed? Well, not really. Around 60 foreign companies, 60, have opened rupee accounts in India, 60 foreign companies. They hail from 22 different countries. So there is interest in the Indian rupee trade. The trick is to keep working. Let's look at some of the key questions here. Why is India trying to internationalize the rupee? What are the challenges? And what more can India do? Let's answer the why first. There are many reasons to push the rupee. Maybe you're trading with a sanctioned country like Iran or Venezuela or Russia. In such cases, you can't use the US dollar, so the rupee makes sense. Another reason is to reduce pressure on your foreign exchange reserves. When you import, you use the dollar. And some countries like India import a lot. Last year, our import bill was $700 billion. So using the rupee is better. It preserves your forex reserves. Then why aren't other countries agreeing? Well, there are two major challenges. Number one, the rupee is not fully convertible. Imagine you're a foreign trader. You want to convert a huge amount of rupees into a foreign currency. You can't just go to a bank and do it. You need approvals from the government. There are limits to how much you can convert. It's an immediate put-off. And number two, what will you buy with the rupee? Just look at the India-Russia trade. India buys 40% of its oil from Russia. Total imports are worth around $46 billion. So obviously, using the rupee helps us, India. But what will Russia do with it? Their imports from India are worth just $4 billion. 4 versus 46. So using the rupee doesn't help them. Russia will be stuck with piles of unusable rupees. In fact, they already are. So we've discussed the need and the challenges. Now let's also look at the solutions. It helps if you export a lot. Like in the case of China, their currency, the yuan, is also like the rupee. It's not fully convertible, yet China pays for Russian oil in the yuan. And Moscow has no problems accepting it. So that's one solution. Produce things that the world wants to buy. Or you can make the rupee fully convertible. Let foreign investors and traders bring in money, exchange it and use it. No limits, no curbs. But that move also has a downside. You will have to stop defending the rupee. If it loses value, you cannot sell dollars to prop it up. You will have to trust the market. The question is India ready for it? In the last few years, the Reserve Bank of India has defended the rupee multiple times. In fact, the IMF took note of it. They criticized the RBI's move in their annual report. So India likes that sort of control. And it's not an easy choice. But it's also not a thumbs down. If the rupee is not being used, it doesn't mean that the Indian economy is not doing well. That's not how it works. Globalizing the rupee is not like flipping a switch. It will take time. You need to rebuild a strong export base. Your economy's fundamentals should be strong, and your trading partners have to be on board. And things are moving in that direction. So it's not a question of if the rupee makes it. It's a question of when. On March 17th, Russia will head to the ballot box. There are no guesses there. The results are all but certain. Vladimir Putin will win his 5th term in office. There's barely any opposition. And those who tried to challenge him have been disqualified. Like this TV journalist, her name is Yekaterina Dantsova. She announced that she would be challenging Putin. She's anti-war. She wants to release political prisoners. But her candidacy has been rejected. The Electoral Commission says there are 100 mistakes on her form. Dantsova says she will challenge this, but it may not change anything. Putin is winning this election, with or without challengers. Our next report tells you why.
200 kilometers west of Moscow lies the city of Rzhev. It has about 60,000 residents, and one of them now wants to challenge Vladimir Putin. Meet Yekaterina Dantsova. She's 40 years old, a TV journalist, anti-war politician, a mother of 3, and now she wants to be Putin's challenger.
We discussed who exactly can become a presidential candidate today, who would promote democratic values. During exchange, the idea was born that it should be a female candidate. This because the Russian politics lack mildness, kindness. Perhaps this appeal for peace should more naturally originate from a woman.
But even before she could dream about it, her run has been cut short. The Election Commission has rejected her candidacy. They cited over 100 mistakes on her form. According to the Commission, Dantsova lacked proper signatures, but they offered some kind words.
You are a young woman. You still have everything ahead of you. Any minus can always be turned into a plus. Any experience is still an experience.
In order to be registered as a candidate, Dantsova needed 300,000 signatures. That isn't an easy task, especially as a regional politician. Dantsova says her team assembled the application in a hurry. She also had trouble finding a lawyer who would certify her bid. But even then, her application was rejected, much to the surprise of no one.
Many people write to me, "You gave us hope. If you manage to get registered, we will definitely vote for you." We will go to vote for the first time after a long while, because we did not vote lately as it seemed senseless to participate in elections without choice.
But Dantsova still remains determined. She wants to appeal the decision at the Supreme Court. But will that change anything? The elections are in 3 months. Russians will head to the ballot box, and for all they know, there's just one candidate, Vladimir Putin. The Kremlin says he enjoys 80% of the support. Even with Dantsova's challenge, there was no doubt about Putin's victory. Until now, his best-known opponent was Alexei Navalny, who's currently in prison serving sentences that are over 30 years. His lawyers last contacted him on December 6th, and since then, no one knows where he is. So Navalny's out. But if Putin is so sure of a victory, why not allow Dantsova to contest? No one knows yet. But a former Kremlin speechwriter says Putin wants to leave little to chance. He didn't want the same scenario as Alexander Lukashenko. In 2020, the Belarus leader was accused of rigging polls to win against popular opponent Svetlana Tikhanovskaya. Reports suggest the Kremlin thinks the Tikhanovskaya effect is possible, so they want to avoid any such scenarios. With no opposition, the judiciary and executive in his control, Putin is all set to win a record 5th term in office. He is sure of his win, but has left little to chance. Putin has been Prime Minister or President of Russia since 1999. And by the end of his new term, he will be the longest-serving Soviet ruler since the 18th century.
Now let's talk about Turkey. Ankara is out for revenge. It has launched airstrikes on northern Iraq and Syria. The Turkish forces are targeting what they call a terrorist movement, the Kurdistan Workers' Party, also known as the PKK. This weekend's airstrikes mark another escalation in West Asia, another brewing conflict. This one too is old and complicated, but let's start with the recent provocation. Last week, Turkish troops were attacked in Iraq. 12 of them were killed.
Tonight, the terror targets in Iraq and Syria were hit with great success by our heroic pilots, and we will continue with determination from now on.
There were two separate incidents in what Turkey calls the claw operation areas. These are regions in Iraq where Ankara has sent troops. A total of 12 Turkish troops died in both clashes. And the PKK took credit for these attacks. In response, Turkey scrambled its jets. The retaliation began on Saturday night. Turkey claims to have hit 29 targets across northern Iraq and Syria, including on bases, shelters, and oil facilities. What you're seeing is an oil site in northeast Syria. 2 of them were bombarded by the Turkish forces on Saturday. Ankara says it killed 30 PKK militants on Sunday, and that another 26 were neutralized today.
Unfortunately, on Friday night, 6 of our heroic friends who were doing their duty in the claw operation area became martyrs, while 7 of our heroic comrades in arms were wounded. And on Saturday, in the clash that broke out in the claw lock operation area, 6 of our heroic sons became martyrs, and 6 of our heroic comrades in arms were lightly wounded.
Turkey puts the current total at 56. But these figures are not confirmed, and the PKK says the death toll is exaggerated and that Turkey's actions are just a publicity stunt. But Turkey says, and I'm quoting, it will continue with determination, which doesn't bode well for northern Iraq and Syria and the Kurdish people. You see, the Kurds are a people without a country. They mostly live in these regions. Some groups like the PKK have been fighting a guerrilla war for decades. They want to carve out their own nation. But there are other factions as well, people who are content with some autonomy. They will be the ones bearing the brunt of this Turkish onslaught, because there are always civilian casualties in such situations. The Kurdish militant factions are based in northern Iraq and Syria. The PKK is in Iraq's Kurdistan region. Syria is home to another group, the People's Defense Units, or YPG. This is also considered a terror group by Turkey, but not by the West. Now, the Kurds in Syria helped the US in their fight against ISIS. Their forces were at the forefront of that war. So they have been spared a US terror designation. America does not call them terrorists. But that does not matter for Ankara. It has vowed to eliminate both the PKK and the Syrian Kurdish forces, which is what complicates the situation for the West. Turkey has pushed back against any aid to the Kurds. It has been holding Sweden's NATO membership hostage for months. Stockholm was forced to arrest and deport Kurdish separatists. Even if the West wants to help its old Kurdish allies in Syria, it cannot risk angering Erdogan. So instead of the West, it was actually Russia that helped the Syrian Kurds. Moscow brokered a ceasefire back in 2020, and Ankara agreed to not attack northern Syria. But the latest strikes show that Erdogan is willing to violate that truce. Will this destabilize the region further, or is this, as the Kurds say, just a publicity stunt? We'll find out in the coming weeks. Our next story comes from Bethlehem. It is known as the birthplace of Jesus Christ, the place to be this holiday season. But as the world celebrates Christmas, the mood in Bethlehem is somber. The roads are empty, no Christmas trees, no lights, no people to celebrate. It's almost as if Christmas is cancelled. And the reason for that is the war next door. The biblical town says it is hard to celebrate as thousands of Gazans die every day. Our next report takes a look at Bethlehem's Christmas in mourning.
Nestled in the heart of the West Bank, at the intersection of history, faith and resilience, stands the city of Bethlehem, the birthplace of Jesus Christ. Bethlehem's spiritual significance is undeniable. Every year, millions of pilgrims visit it to retrace the steps of Mary and Joseph. The city becomes a living tableau during Christmas, bringing the story of nativity to life. But this year, the biblical town is not celebrating. There are no Christmas trees, no lights. The shops are shuttered. The decorations are missing, and so are the people. Christmas is cancelled in Bethlehem.
The whole world is celebrating Christmas this year, but not Bethlehem, not the birthplace of our Lord Jesus Christ. Bethlehem is celebrating Christmas with sadness and sorrow because of what's happening in Gaza and in all the West Bank, all Palestinian territories.
Usually at this time of year, the streets ring with laughter and carols. This year, there are only echoes of a conflict, leaving the streets eerily quiet. The city of Jesus' birth lies in the middle of a war zone.
It is a very sad Christmas. As we saw, there is no atmosphere of feast because we are in a war, terrible war, and our thought goes first and foremost to Gaza, to our people of Gaza, to all the people of Gaza, but special attention to our also Christian community of Gaza who is suffering. But I know that we are not the only ones suffering. 2 million are suffering without house, without hungry. They are hungry, unbearable situation.
In Manger Square, every Christmas, a vibrant nativity scene stands out. It's the top attraction of the city. This time too, there is a nativity scene, but with a twist. It's called Nativity Under the Rubble. It's surrounded by rubble and barbed wire. Baby Jesus is in a white sheet, similar to those used to wrap children who have lost their lives in Gaza. In another installation, baby Jesus is in an incubator.
My message here to stop the war, first of all, stop the war now. At the moment, when Jesus was born tonight, was born dead, because the bombing still falling for about 80 days on the people of Gaza, the children of Gaza.
A somber Christmas in Bethlehem is also a heavy blow to its tourism-dependent economy. The tourism sector has already lost $200 million, and it could increase by the end of this year. Major airlines have cancelled flights to Israel. 70 hotels in Bethlehem have shut down. Over 6,000 employees have lost their jobs. As the war continues, things will only get worse. Bethlehem has weathered centuries of change. Its ancient streets whisper stories of conquerors, pilgrims, wars, and checkpoints. So while this may be a Christmas in mourning for the biblical town, Bethlehem is praying, like so many others, for peace to return. But given the current situation, that would be nothing short of a Christmas miracle.
Adolfo, León Aquino, fuerte el aplauso por favor. Y al contrario, hacerlas más.
Sì, prego. Avanti, avanti. Sì, prego. Avanti, avanti.
Oh, he's been really busy today.
You're welcome. Merry Christmas.
You're so welcome. Merry Christmas.
It starts months in advance. A lot of work, great volunteers. So the men and women, to include civilian.
Indian wrestling is on the mat, and no, it's not because of the athletes, it's because of the bosses, the men who run the Wrestling Federation of India, the WFI, Wrestling Federation of India. It's been suspended by the Sports Ministry, and the timing is key. Just last week, the WFI conducted elections. A new panel was elected to run Indian wrestling. And this is the man who became president, Sanjay Singh. But 3 days later, the panel got suspended. The government asked the IOA to take over. That's the Indian Olympic Association, IOA. Strange, right? Not if you've been following Indian wrestling and the controversy. Let me tell you the backstory first. In January 2023, this year, Indian wrestlers began protesting. What was their demand? An investigation into Brij Bhushan Sharan Singh. He was then the president of the WFI, also a lawmaker of India's ruling party. The wrestlers accused him of sexual harassment, things like groping, stalking, and seeking sexual favors. Around 7 women accused him. But Brij Bhushan did not step down. He denies all these charges. And that's when the Sports Ministry got involved. It formed a committee to look into the allegations, also called for immediate elections at the WFI. This was way back in April this year, April 2023. It would take another 7 months to hold the elections. Meanwhile, the protests continued. The wrestlers were not happy with the government response. Not even a police complaint had been filed. In the end, the Supreme Court got involved, the top court in India. They asked the Delhi police to file FIRs. The next month, in the month of May, we saw a low point. Protesters and cops faced off during the protests. Some of them were manhandled and detained. That's when global bodies took notice. The International Olympic Committee condemned the police action. Even otherwise, it was disturbing to see this. We're talking about national heroes here, men and women who won medals for India. Seeing them dragged and detained triggered public backlash. Yet the WFI polls kept getting delayed, and the result was this. In the month of August, the World Wrestling Body suspended WFI. They said no elections, no recognition. Finally, this month, polls were announced, and they were won by Sanjay Singh. End of story, right? New president, new start. Well, not quite. Sanjay Singh is a close aide of Brij Bhushan. He calls him brother. After winning, both men attended a press conference together. It looked like Brij Bhushan got more garlands than Sanjay Singh. So once again, the wrestlers reacted. Olympic medalist Sakshi Malik announced her retirement. Bajrang Punia returned his Padma Shri award. Punia too is an Olympic medalist. Now this was all expected. People knew Brij Bhushan's proxy would win the election. So why did the suspension come 3 days later? A couple of reasons. For starters, the brazenness. The WFI doesn't have its own office, so guess where the new panel and president worked from? Brij Bhushan's house, a place where he allegedly harassed wrestlers. That was strike one. Secondly, the new president made a quick-fire decision. He announced that 2 upcoming competitions will be held in Gonda, a city in Uttar Pradesh, also the hometown of Brij Bhushan. So the government said enough is enough. It suspended the WFI panel and the president. Is it a U-turn? Yes, it is. But it's also a strong statement. Brij Bhushan now says he's leaving the sport. He won't be involved in Indian wrestling anymore. Compare that to his statements earlier this year. He refused to leave no matter what. As for the new president, he is cooperating. He has asked the sports ministry for some time to build his case. If that fails, he could look at legal options. Either way, the big takeaway is this. The right thing has been done. Should it have taken almost 1 year to get there? Maybe not. But it's better late than never, we say. Wrestlers have welcomed the ministry's move. Some opposition leaders have also supported it. The next step is to rebuild trust. After all, this is wrestling. It may not be India's most popular event, but it has given the country many medals. Around 23 at the World Wrestling Championships, 7 at the Olympics. India has a distinct wrestling culture, one that is a mix of tradition and new age professionalism. It's a mix that has worked for us, which is why rebuilding the trust is important to make sure that athletes feel safe and respected. Now let's shift our focus to Serbia. It's a nation in southern Europe, in the Balkans, and the country is going through chaos. Serbia held snap elections last week. The government scheduled the polls in the face of mass protests. But despite the public anger, Serbia's ruling party ended up winning more seats in parliament. They tightened their grip on power. International observers say the polls were unfair. Opposition parties in Serbia say the elections were rigged, and they've been protesting for days. But last night, the demonstrations turned violent. Here's a report.
These were the scenes from Serbia's capital Belgrade last night. Thousands against the government. The demonstration.
Whose building is that one to my left? Whose is this city hall here? Alexander Vucic? Is it yours and your thieves? Starting from tonight, this building will be liberated. That's the plan we have.
But there were police forces inside to prevent this. The protesters pushed the gates. They were pepper sprayed and tear gassed. Then things got really ugly. Protesters started breaking the city hall windows. They threw stones at the office, clashed with the police, and it ended in a brawl.
There were torches, poles. Look at the number of stones. This is the stone that was thrown at the members of the Ministry of Internal Affairs, despite the protective equipment that we used. We came to a situation where we had 8 injured police officers, including a colleague with serious bodily injuries.
It's not a good look for the protesters. Whatever their grievances, last night's incident has discredited their movement.
Those who vowed to fight violence confirmed once again that they are real thugs and that they want to destroy our cities, villages, houses, our country before all. We will not let them destroy our country.
President Alexander Vučić is already using this incident to go after Serbia's political opposition, the coalition known as Serbia Against Violence. He was targeting them with his jibe, and he questioned their entire reason for existence. Serbia has been protesting for months now. The people have been angry with Vučić and his government, especially after 2 mass shootings in May this year. One took place in the capital Belgrade. A 13-year-old killed 10 people at a school on May 3rd. Then the very next day, a 20-year-old went on a shooting spree. He fired an assault rifle from his car and killed 9 people. These violent events shocked Serbia. Thousands took to the streets to take the government to task, and political parties banded together to form the Serbia Against Violence coalition. Vučić and his ruling party were being pressured to resign, so he arranged for snap polls in December, less than 2 years since the last general election. So you'd think that Vučić would have been staring at a huge electoral loss. But when the results came last week, Vučić had strengthened his hold on power.
We received several reports of mass registration in Belgrade of voters from abroad and from other municipalities inside Serbia, specifically to enlarge the electorate.
Instances of serious irregularities such as vote buying and ballot box stuffing were observed.
Those were international election observers. They say the elections were rigged in the ruling party's favor. This is why Serbia's opposition is protesting. Many have been holding peaceful rallies every day. Some have even gone on hunger strike. But yesterday was a turning point. The protests turned violent, and so they've given Vučić ammunition. Will the president now be able to discredit the entire political opposition? Or will the Serbian protesters be able to regain their legitimacy? It all depends on if the Serbia Against Violence movement can stay true to their name.
From the command itself, and many volunteers from the community and sponsors start in advance, and literally after tomorrow they'll start planning for next year. That's how important this is for the community to enjoy. We have this opportunity to provide that's great, joyful, peaceful engagement with children around the world. Yeah, 68 years is amazing. And I think part of that, families to have the opportunity to connect their children with the idea of, peace and, positivity, stuff. I think there's no parent that would not want their kid to be part of that. And for me, as now the grandfather for a 2-year-old, this is my first time inside this headquarters. So it's my honor to be able to participate in the same way, because we know this can bring smiles to people. And there's one thing you can not have enough of is, a kid smiling, parents smiling, and bringing that family together for this special time. I think the part is we still don't know the magical capabilities. Like, how does Santa move so fast? We know he travels at in a different time zone than we as normal people can track. So he moves much faster in a minute than our perspective of a minute. So his ability to kind of travel faster, that's how he can provide so many presents around the world in such a short period of time. And we still don't know how someone who's about 260 pounds can get down any chimney. But again, that's the magic of Santa Claus and kind of the spirit of Christmas.
Seculo decim anno circiter nativitas em.
Now let's talk about the tech sector. It isn't feeling festive. It has slowed down hirings, including in India. I'm talking about big tech, the likes of Facebook or Meta, Amazon, Apple, Microsoft, Netflix, Google. If you want to work for any of these companies, you'll most likely have to wait. They've cut vacancies by 90%, 90, meaning if there were 100 open positions earlier, only 10 are open now. And this is quite a fall from the last few years. You see, during the pandemic, the tech sector expanded aggressively. The world moved online, so there was a glut of jobs and a growing demand for talent. It helped the employees. Their pay packages shot up. Many took up new jobs with jaw-dropping hikes. But since last year, winter has set in, the money has dried up, and tech companies are tightening their belts. The worst hit are the startups. Let me show you some data. Since 2022, more than 34,000 employees have been sacked, with 121 startups cutting their staff. This year, 69 startups fired more than 14,000 employees in India. And among these, the worst affected were those in the education space, better known as the ed-tech startups, education technology. Since last year, 24 ed-tech companies have fired almost 15,000 workers. So startups are cutting positions and big tech is not hiring. Do you know what that means? There is a surplus of talent, more workers, fewer jobs. As of May, close to 200,000 tech workers had been sacked in India, including from both startups and big tech. So for new graduates, getting placed is going to be tough. There will be fewer jobs available. And if you're looking to switch jobs, it will be tougher to find the right fit. Also, keep your salary expectations in check, because this situation may not improve anytime soon. The outlook for 2024 is bearish. Leading Indian tech companies expect less revenue. As of October, 5 out of 7 leading companies had cut their forecasts, including Infosys, HCL, and Tata Consultancy Services, or TCS. These are the top names in outsourcing. They depend on international contracts. By extension, their success is tied to the global tech industry. But right now, there is instability worldwide and a global downturn. By October this year, 7 big tech companies had lost more than $3 trillion. These are Meta, Apple, Amazon, Netflix, Google or Alphabet, Tesla and Microsoft. Together, their market value fell by $3 trillion. And just like their Indian counterparts, these companies have laid off thousands of workers. In 2022, more than 1,060 tech companies worldwide laid off over 160,000 workers. And this year, 2023, was worse. More than 1,100 companies sacked more than 260,000 employees. So when there is a global downturn, how can India remain immune? This turmoil has also exposed some weaknesses, overvalued companies, unsustainable startups, and a workforce with a skills crunch. And that's the most pressing issue right now, especially among the new graduates. Look at this recent survey. It covered 440,000 Indian students across 2,500 campuses, and the findings are concerning. Just 45% of these students were employable. What about the rest? Their skills need an upgrade. Today, the CEOs of leading tech companies in the world are Indians. If India wants to sustain this dominance, it must focus on upgrading its workforce faster, because technology is speeding ahead, and those who can keep pace will find a place in the job market. On Friday, France grounded a flight carrying 303 Indian passengers. It was coming from the UAE, headed for Nicaragua. It stopped in France for a technical stopover, but authorities grounded the plane. They believed several passengers on board were victims of human trafficking. An investigation later, the passengers have been allowed to leave. They will land in Mumbai tonight, but some of them have stayed back in France. They want asylum. Reports say these passengers were trying to migrate illegally. They were flying to Central America to cross into the United States through the Mexico border. Here's a report.
On Friday, a chartered flight was headed to Nicaragua. It was flying from the UAE. But at France, it decided to make a stop, a technical stopover, so the plane landed at Vantage Airport, located almost 150 kilometers from Paris. But before they could take off, the plane was grounded. The authorities got a tip-off. They learnt that some of the passengers were reportedly victims of human trafficking. Throughout the weekend, there was an intensive probe. All passengers were confined at the airport, including a 21-month-old child. Beds, toilets and showers were installed. India too was granted consular access to those on board the flight. The airport soon turned into a makeshift courtroom. Lawyers dealt with passengers. Judges conducted emergency hearings. They decided whether passengers could be held any longer. But soon they found there were irregularities in the probe, so further hearings were scrapped and the passengers were allowed to go. So the flight took off. But reports say 40 of them decided to stay. They applied for asylum in France. So around 250 people are expected to return. The airline denies any claim of a trafficking ring, but reports suggest the passengers were victims of a suspected scheme, possibly an illegal migration scheme. Prosecutors haven't commented on it yet, but reports suggest the ultimate destination for the passengers was the US. They were set to fly to Nicaragua, then travel to Mexico, and cross into the United States from there. Nicaragua is often used as a temporary hopover for migrants because of its relaxed entry requirements. There's been a surge in Indians crossing the Mexico-US border. Until this September, over 40,000 Indians have been arrested. This is for trying to enter the US illegally from Mexico. It's nearly double the number from 2022. And it's not only a dangerous venture, but also an expensive undertaking. Indians pay human traffickers a lot of money, anywhere between $20,000 and $75,000 US. This is to take them from India to America. But flights alone can't get them there. After that, it's long days of trekking, starving, and dealing with authorities, all to get into the United States. So while these Indians may be on their way back home, they are among the lucky ones, because thousands never get this opportunity.
And now it's time for Vantage Shots, images that tell the story. As the world celebrates Christmas, we leave you with visuals from across the globe. Thanks for watching. We'll see you tomorrow.
Namaste, Jai Hind. We are here at the Adiyogi in Coimbatore at the Isha temple in the presence of the one and only Sadhguru. Namaskaram, Prabhu.
Namaskaram.
Lovely to see you, sir. And plenty of things that I want to ask you. But first up, let's start with something which is close to your heart and matters to all of us. It is the campaign to save soil and the message that you took at the recently concluded COP28.
See, when we say COP, it is a meeting of all the parties, which means the nations. So if we want to effect any policy changes worldwide, global policy change of our concerns about the global well-being, individual nations have their own stuff. But there are certain aspects of our life, one is definitely the environment, where our concern cannot be addressed individually or even in national terms. It needs to be addressed globally. So COP is the place. There are different types of COPs. There is one for desertification, one for climate change. COP28 was CCC, that is UNCCC, which is for climate change. In 2022, in the month of January, there was a COP26 in Glasgow. When I spoke to various people who attended that, including a few environmental ministers of environment of different nations, they said, Sadhguru, how come the word soil was not even mentioned? I said, you are the ministers of environment, you must ask this question. Why soil is being ignored? Because the agenda is being set by certain activists for whom oil and coal is the only issue. I'm not saying that they are not an issue, they are an issue. Emissions are a serious issue, no question, it must be addressed. But how can you ignore soil and address climate issues on the planet? So today, we have, after that, within 2 months, I started the Save Soil movement. On 21st of March, 100 days, we managed to touch 3.91 billion people in those 100 days. Why this number is important is, governments will sit up and act in a democratic nation only if 60% of the population pays attention to something or says something about it. But in the world, individual human beings, citizens of the world have never stood up and said anything of, serious concern to us. Petty things we always fight. Things that matter to us, things that matter to the future generations on this planet, has never been said. Once there is a certain attention from the public, governments cannot ignore. See, where in COP26 they are not even spoken about soil, in 27 in Egypt we were official observers. In COP28, which is this year, they titled an event called Soil the Superstar.
Lovely, what a change.
So from being absent, it became a superstar. So European Union declared that soil regeneration is an important part of mitigating climate change. At least 40% of climate mitigation can be achieved through soil regeneration. When I say soil regeneration, essentially what this climate mitigation is we are trying to catch the carbon molecules in the air. How will you catch them? You have no way. You are only trying to stop the excess emission. You stop the emission, but still you cannot catch it. Who catches it? It is the green leaf. So every extra green leaf that you put on this planet is one more step towards climate mitigation. And every extra green leaf will produce a whole system of root system and a whole agency of organisms. It's amazing that even in scientific communities, 80% of them are unaware. I'm sorry I'm saying this because this is not to deride scientific community, but lot of things are driven by activism, not by pursuing what is there. 80% of the people do not know a tree or a plant cannot get its nutrients from the soil, without the agency of organisms. It is they who facilitate that. The same is true within your body to a large extent. Without organisms, you cannot exist. But that is depleting at a pace that you cannot imagine. If we have to strengthen that, we have to put it back into the soil. Carbon is not poison. We are all carbon life.
Correct.
From a worm to an insect to a bird to an animal and a tree and you and me are all carbon. Only thing is, carbon is in the wrong place. It should be in the soil, it's floating up in the air. There was a law in this country, in most states, even now, some of the states have that. If you grow a tree in your own land and later on for your use you cut it, they can come and arrest you.
Arrest you.
So no farmer wants to plant a tree. And then they say, all the valuable trees you cannot plant. You can plant something else. You can't plant sandalwood. This is the land of sandalwood, why can't I plant it? No, this will happen, that'll happen. Now what are you doing? You're importing sandalwood from Australia.
Yeah.
Okay? Over 1 lakh crores worth of timber you're importing, but you won't let the farmers grow. So this is what we try to change. This is not afforestation. This is farming happening along with tree plantation, because everything grows better when the soil is properly plowed by the roots, not by the tractors. COP16, which is the UNCCD COP, is happening in Riyadh. They have requested us to help them to structure the event itself around soil.
Fantastic. So from not being considered at all to soil becoming the superstar.
It's gone that far thanks to all the millions of people or billions of people who stood up and raised their voice. So I'm requesting you must keep your voice up till it happens, because it's still only in the narrative. Action is yet to happen.
Action is yet to happen. At least you brought it into the narrative, and let's hope action happens. Now Sadhguru, from science, soil, to spiritualism and Shiva. So I want to ask you, we are on the cusp of something very historic for us here at Bharat, that the Janmbhumi of a great Shiva Bhakta is now going to be celebrated as a temple is going to be consecrated. So let me ask you, who is Ram to you?
For us he is Rama. See, this is very important. People are using these words without knowing the significance. Today, this thing is coming into everywhere. People are referring to him as Maryada Purushottam. So clearly you are saying that he is a Uttama among the Purushas.
Uttama Purusha.
Yeah. So he is a great human being. They did not say he's God.
Yeah, they did.
They said he is a great human being. So this is the fundamentals of our civilization. We are not looking for people to descend from heaven and become great here. We are looking for people who are born here, normal birth,
who rise,
and they're raised to such a point that you could not identify him as a human being. You started thinking he is divine. So here divinity is cultured, divinity is grown within the human being. Divinity does not descend from heaven, because we know the planet is round and it's spinning. We don't even know which is up and down.
True.
So we always looking at how to grow divinity. So we call him Maryada Purushottam. That means as where you thought a human being will not go, he went.
He went.
See, if you look at his life events, it's a serial disaster.
Lot of pain.
At the age of 19, he is coronated as a king. Some political something, he is dislodged and he has to go to forest. Well, forest means, because you see in the television shows, you think forest means it's honeymoon, you went with your young wife and golden deer came, all that. This is all literature, all right? Sent to the forest means it's sent as a punishment. And his wife is not some Adivasi girl, she's a princess, not fit to live in the forest, I'm saying. Because people don't know what is forest. I have lived in jungles by myself. If I went out for a week in the jungle and came back, even my mother wouldn't recognize me, head to toe, insect bites, all right? Everything is swollen. And it's not easy, it's fantastic, but it's not easy, all right? So this was not sent so that he can have honeymoon in the forest. He was sent to the forest as a kind of a punishment. Whatever led to that, let's not go into the story. knowing that it's going to be so hard, his brother leaves his wife and goes with the brother because he knows it's going to be extremely hard. So, after that, as if that was not enough, somebody kidnaps his wife, then he's not that kind of man. After all, he's a king, he could have found solutions in the neighborhood. He's not that kind of man. He loves his wife, walks down 3,000 kilometers and goes and fights, burns down a beautiful city. All these are painful things to do. For any sensitive man, even if it's your enemy's city, burning it down is not a pleasure. Only for somebody very crude, they will enjoy it. Others will feel pain. Then he brings back his wife. Then when he comes back to his kingdom, again some political issue, and then again he has to send his wife to the forest. She's pregnant. See, for an emperor or a king, by then he's an emperor, for him his progeny is very important. Now there is no sonogram, he doesn't know whether it's male or female children. Then she goes into the forest, he endures that. Then she delivers 2 boys, he doesn't know. When they are around 12 years of age, he almost kills them. If something really negative should happen to somebody's life, in terms of situations, the worst thing that can happen to you is, knowingly or unknowingly, you kill your own child. He almost did it. Fortunately, it did not happen. Then his wife dies there, he never again gets to see her. This is a serial disaster. But why he is Maryada Purushottam is, no matter what life does to him, he never became full of angst or anger or hatred. He fought when he has to fight. Out of dignity he fought. Out of what he thought is right, for that he fought, but never became hateful. And he kills his enemy who kidnapped his wife and whatever nonsense. Then he comes and repents for 1 year in the Himalayas. So, for this you bow down, because in this civilization, let's get this very clear, in this civilization, God is not supreme to us. Mukti, liberation, moksha is supreme to us. So when he is alive, he is in Jivan Mukti, that is, no matter what life hits you in whichever way, you are unaltered, you are the same person. This is the only thing that we value, and he displayed that in a tremendous way. Because of that, I'm even now, till recently, after 5,000–6,000 years, he still had real estate issues. Fortunately, it's settled now, thanks to everybody who made that happen, and I'm sure this means a world to multitude of people.
But why should we have this real estate issue, Sadhguru? And if Ram is in our consciousness and he's across Bharat, Rama, why the fight for why is the Janbhoomi so important? Be it the Krishna Janbhoomi or be it the Ram Janbhoomi. And also Kashi Vishwanath. So, 3 important pillars for
why means, see,
the faith of Hindus.
Right now in the Indian law, I'm saying, you came here and you stole my car and went away. You parked it in your house. I can't come and slap you and take it back. Then I will become a criminal, okay? Now I have to go to the court. And it may take 12 years to get my jeep back, okay? To get my jeep back, it may take 12 years. In that 12 years, my jeep may get junked. Unfortunately, this is the kind of laws that human beings have everywhere, particularly in our country. But like Ram, let's not become bitter. Let us work towards it and make it happen, because that's what he did. That's why we appreciate him, that's why we worship him, that's why we look up to him. Let's emulate him, that's most important.
But he's also a Shiva Bhakta. The other issue is let me ask you this.
I am not a Shiva Bhakta. He's my 50% partner.
He's a 50% partner.
But he does nothing, makes me do everything.
So let me ask about the sleeping partner and his seat in Kashi, the oldest of the cities mentioned in the…
See, being a sleeping partner is a damn good thing, You don't have to do anything, but still you are 50%.
This entire conversation, the Prime Minister also made a reference that things are coming a circle. There is a rising consciousness about who we are as a people and what matters to us in our civilizational ethos. Do you think that is happening? That's true? And that's the reason why matters like Krishna Janmabhoomi, Gyanvapi, Ram Janmabhoomi are coming to the fore and they're now being openly spoken about and listened.
The politics of negativity, that if I don't like you, even if you say the best things, I will anyway banish you, I'll bombard you, that kind of politics is changing. But I think this is largely a consequence of technology and social media, that a single media is against you. A single media cannot set the narrative anymore. You say whatever you want in your show, people will do their own thing. So essentially, there's no official voice anymore. It's only gossip which rules. Social media is gossip gone global, you know. Gossip has gone global, and gossip is always the most powerful communication. With technology, you can gossip with somebody in Timbuktu, not with your neighbor. I think this is powerful. This is why it's coming back, that in many ways, that nobody can set the narrative. People are setting the narrative, slowly it's building up. And I think it'll build up much more. It should have happened much sooner. But if something happened with official push, then it would always be seen as a negative force. But I'm glad it's happening because of people building up the narrative. It's buzzing everywhere. See, the crowds how they are. It's buzzing everywhere.
But why is the Adi Yogi so special? Why is Shiva so